Stephen Moutry, Sean Rogers, Raymond McCartney. Anyone aware of any other apologies?
Paul Given is in the chamber at the minute because I think it's Justice is on first thing this morning, so he'll be in there.
Agenda item 2, minutes of the committee meeting of the 18th of November. Refer members to tabled items.
We just want to skip on because we are a court for a decision.
Yeah. Okay. Are members content that the minutes are a true reflection of the proceedings of the meeting of the 18th of November? Agreed. No suggested amendments. I'd like to inform members that all matters arising are substantive agenda items. Agenda item 4, Women in Politics and the Northern Ireland Assembly. Committee consideration of evidence received under phase 1 of the review. Members have the option of going into closed session to discuss issues further. Do members want to go into closed session?
I don't think we need to.
No, we're happy to stay in open session. Fair enough. I'd inform members that a 2-minute video of the inquiry event will be shown. Are we ready for that, Claire?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh dear.
Having more women in politics is not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
Political parties need to be encouraging and supporting more women candidates coming forward, not just in elections, but also in terms of their work that they do on a daily basis. The gender inequality that is in society in general needs also to be tackled in order for us to make sure that women are supported and encouraged to come in to political life and to come into public life as well.
The Northern Ireland Assembly currently has 22 female members out of a total of 108, just over 20%. These figures are stark. Such underrepresentation highlights the importance of taking steps to ensure that the inequality is addressed. Women, along with other underrepresented groups, have already waited generations for equal access. For real change is needed, and the outcomes of this review will help in making that change.
I'd like to ask members if they agree that the video should be uploaded on the committee web pages. Are we in agreement with that?
Great.
Okay. At section 5, pages 10 to 21, is the response from the Alliance Party to the call for evidence paper. Table today is the response from the Green Party to the call for evidence paper, along with paper Changing the Conversation, a pathways approach to increasing women's involvement in the Green Party in Northern Ireland. Ask members, are you content for all the submissions, including party submissions, to be published on the committee web pages?
Yep, great.
Sinn Féin's submission will be circulated after the meeting. I refer members to pages 22 to 53, in which there is a paper which maps out the evidence received in phase 1 of the review set against the terms of reference. The senior Assistant Assembly Clerk has prepared a PowerPoint presentation on the next stage of the review, which includes deciding on the recommendations to be included in the report. You doing that, Claire?
Yes.
Chairman, could you just
I
point out
wouldn't
something?
mind if ours was back.
Yeah, we can, but we have to look at it officially.
Chairman, could I just point out something in our submission? There's a misprint there. No, I don't think it's our fault, rather than on page 8, first question, section 4. It says Alliance notes that the number of female politicians elected is roughly similar. I think it should say the proportion. That kind of makes a difference.
We can be in touch with, I think it was Ben from the Alliance Party that submitted this submission.
Yeah, no, I'm saying it's his fault. It's not yours.
Well, we'll just give them an opportunity to correct it if you want.
Probably want it in writing, I suspect.
Whatever. That's just shows you all know we're not that stupid. It's proportion should be the word.
And Chair, our Deputy Chair, just to let you know, we submitted ours last night. So
That's okay, it'll be circulated after the meeting.
it just would have been useful to inform the meeting as well.
Well, members wouldn't have time to read it now, so we're aware that it's there and it'll be circulated afterwards. Okay? Claire, you want to go ahead with your presentation?
Yes, members. What we're hoping to do today really is that the committee have gathered quite a lot of evidence in relation to this inquiry, and we're hoping to produce a draft report for the next meeting of the committee, which will be the 9th of December, with a view to agreeing the report in January, the start of January, when the committee reconvene again. To enable us to do that, we just really today wanted to review the evidence that we've received to date, be that in maybe now 18 submissions, 19 submissions that we'll have received as of the end of today from the political parties. The submissions from a number of key stakeholders, from women's groups, from the youth sectors, etc. Also from the committee visits to Wales and to Iceland, and from the very comprehensive research papers that we received. So really the purpose of today is to review all that evidence and to look at what key issues that the committee would like reflected in the draft report and brought forward. In their pack, we have for members on page 22 of their pack, we have a copy of a briefing paper there with a number of key discussion points. And from 27 on, what we have, page 27 onwards, we've prepared a summary of the issues raised. What the committee secretariat have done is they have looked at all the issues that we received, and we've broken them down into 4 barriers just to facilitate the ease of review today. We've looked at institutional barriers, which are really the barriers within the parliamentary setting of the Assembly. The political barriers, and that could be barriers within the political parties and their selection processes. The socio-economic barriers, and that's really within the wider society in Northern Ireland, issues in which respect executive and its departments would be in charge of, such as issues such as childcare, etc. And the ideological and psychological barriers, and they're really the barriers that women themselves feel that they face, be it confidence, issues, self-esteem, etc., which really prevent them from entering politics. So I suppose the first question that we really want to ask is, in light of that, are the committee in agreement that, they are really what we've identified today are the key barriers, and are they content that we have identified what are the key issues going forward? The other suggestion that was made quite a lot in the submissions that we received was, rather than us dictate to MLAs what the barriers are, should one of the recommendations that the committee look at is really to invite the Assembly to carry out a survey of all female MLAs to really let them identify and articulate what they consider the key barriers to entry into politics would be. So that's something that the committee may wish to consider. And certainly on the 9th of December, what we intend to do is bring back a discussion paper with a number of key conclusions and recommendations that the committee may wish to consider over the Christmas recess period. So just maybe...
For feedback on that suggestion? Or
yes, indeed.
I think it's a good enough suggestion, but I am always very conscious that local council is a stepping stone. So has there been an extensive survey by NILGA or others of local councillors, female local councillors? Because I see it, there's Paul's a classic example. It was a stepping stone to ultimately becoming an Assembly member. So are there barriers there which stop women taking that first step, which then enables them to move on?
Certainly, again, we'll pull out the research for that, but the Women in Local Council initiative, that was one of the issues that they identified and had tried to work on, and certainly that initiative had aimed to increase the number of, at the local, to identify and address the barriers at the local council level. So that may be something that the committee may, or the Assembly may wish to consider, and during the event on the 23rd of October, we did explore that initiative, and there seemed to be a broad consensus from the stakeholders there that that is an initiative that the Assembly should seek to adopt.
Okay.
But again, we can, on the discussion paper, we can provide more information on that, and certainly the committee draft report will make reference to the Women in Local Council initiative. But that is something that we can reflect in the recommendation.
And presumably, and I don't know if it fits in here, but just following on from Roy's point, another stepping stone can be public bodies. Women and the lack of women in public bodies can adversely impact them moving into political life.
Absolutely, and again, that's something that we have pulled out from under the socio-economic barriers is the public appointments process and addressing the gender inequality that exists in the public appointments process. The committee had a paper from research, I think, which we considered at the last meeting, which showed the significant underrepresentation of females in public appointment process. So again, we can pull out that research if the committee are so minded and reflect that in the draft report about the underrepresentation of females in the public appointment process.
Okay.
For the institutional barriers, then we had looked at the unsocial hours of the Assembly, the adversarial environment, and the lack of profiling of female members within the Assembly. We looked at some of the existing initiatives that we have in place. For example, the Procedures Committee is currently undertaking a review of the Code of Conduct. The Procedures Committee also looked at the sitting times of the Assembly, and again last week the committee considered a paper from the Secretariat in which it sort of had recommended no changes to the sitting times. The committee had also looked at or discussed the issue of electronic voting, and the committee again had made reference to the Procedures Committee which had considered this issue, and we put forward a paper last week outlining the conclusions of the Procedures Committee in that electronic voting was considered to be just too expensive to implement in the Assembly. But what research had done for the committee was looked at allocated voting times, which currently happens in Sweden and Scotland. As you see there, the positive action is the Swedish Riksdag, which do have allocated voting times, and that may be something that the committee may wish to look at.
I think that deferred voting times is a worthwhile issue to take forward. But I also actually think that electronic voting is something which should not be, that we might need to look at. Again, technology moves on within years. We all now have our Wi-Fi enabled tablets. So, I just don't know, but is there some infrastructure that can be built around them which may lend itself to our new technology lead to a more efficient solution than what was initially thought of? Was it 2 years ago, or how long ago was it?
I think
Only last year. Sorry, Chair, I sit in procedures, so it was only, or maybe beginning of this year.
The voting, the electronic voting, it was quite. The sitting times as well was quite recent.
It was only at the beginning of this year.
But again, that wouldn't be for the Assembly and Executive Review Committee to carry out a review of. We would have to make recommendations.
Make a recommendation, but it's nevertheless probably in my Deputy Speaker's role, I'm very, very conscious of timings, how the timing estimate changes depending on whether or not there's going to be a lot of votes. You know yourselves that there are 100 clauses and 20 of them end up having votes. That could add 2 hours.
2 hours, yeah.
Well, that's what I wanted to. Are we talking about the electronic voting system purely on the basis of the time-consuming element of what we have at the moment? Because I don't. Is that why we're talking about electronic voting? I don't think it wouldn't have any relevance in and of itself to the gender imbalance.
Unsociable hours.
The unsociable hours.
Yep, it adds to unsociable hours.
Because at the
you have
moment,
another 2 hours on to.
right, that's what I said now. So we're just talking about electronic voting because in the small number of circumstances where there are large numbers of votes without electronic voting, it adds to the time we're setting. Is that what you're getting at, right?
Yep.
Right.
That was a point that was discussed previously by the committee. Were there measures that the committee could look at to address the unsociable hours? And obviously, in some legislators in other jurisdictions, they have introduced either electronic voting, or they have introduced allocated times for voting to try and address the.
Although, have we worked out on how? I mean, it is very frustrating. I find it frustrating on the very small number of occasions when there have been a series of votes. But have we worked out on how many occasions that has happened, say, in the past couple of years? Doesn't seem to me that it's happened very often, but can we get that, see how many?
Yes, I do believe actually that the research paper had looked at the number of times that the committee has sat late and past the allocated sitting times. I can't remember the times off my head, but I can try and pull that off for you. I think it's
Yeah, but just so we're clear now, I'm not just talking about sitting late beyond the allocated sitting time, because there could be other reasons not connected with votes.
Yeah.
That's why I come back to the initial point I made. I think electronic voting in and of itself is a completely separate matter. I don't see how it could possibly come into a gender issue, unless the absence of electronic voting was meaning that we were on a very regular basis having to sit well beyond the sitting time. Then it would be relevant. But that's why I would like to see on how many occasions repetitive votes led to excessive sitting hours, and then you could take a decision on it.
Trevor?
I see something here about deferred voting. It's a new phrase. That sounds like it has some sort of promise, That would mean that members, whether male or female, might not need to sit here until 3 in the morning if the vote was going to take place the following day, which we do occasionally anyway when there's a petition. So there might be some legs in that.
I suppose it fits into the notion of allocated voting times, so that on a Monday and Tuesday votes are between 5 and 6.
Scotland.
And if you don't get all the votes done, you come back the next day and so on.
Well, yeah, there's probably some sort of compromise position there that would make good sense,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm particularly thinking of the late night ones, and since we're talking about trying to encourage female members here, that might be
But there's certainly a deferred vote system in Westminster that's used very, very regularly. Now, it's not enacted on a large number of occasions. But by a large number of occasions, I mean there aren't 15 deferred votes on any one day. There may be 1 or 2, maybe 3 maximum, but it is a regular feature almost every week. There is at least one deferred vote from either the previous night or the Thursday night.
Yeah.
And it is a useful, it's a useful device.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that perhaps if we'd be a step forward, if any vote that was going to be taken, let's say after 7 o'clock at night, had to be deferred until the next day, it would be quite simple, really,
Yeah. Katrina?
Though I just think we need to be careful too in trying to support women, that you actually can make things a bit more difficult. I agree we should have a look at, voting times. But by deferring, you could actually end up, you have to think of distance, and a lot of the women are from outside Belfast, and it means they're travelling an extra day, and there's also a huge cost if you're travelling up just for a vote. So I just think we need to have a look at that. But I just wouldn't jump to saying it will definitely help on social hours.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea. I think it was was it the Scottish Parliament or the Welsh, where the timing was 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and that's everyone knew there was votes at that time.
Just on deferred voting at Westminster, what normally happens is it's deferred to the next sitting day. So there's never a vote on a day that you're not normally here. So if there was a vote to be taken, say, on a Monday night, and it was deferred, one would presume it would be 12 noon on Tuesday, when most people are here anyway. And if there was a Tuesday night or late afternoon vote on Tuesday, it would be held then on the following Monday.
Yeah.
It would always be on a sitting day.
That's exactly the point.
But that's not currently happening, because, like, if we don't vote on a Tuesday, we have to come back on a Wednesday to vote. Isn't that right, Roy?
We're talking about reviewing the procedures.
Yeah.
So you
Oh,
can
yeah.
get
We're talking about.
But
new
we need to
procedures
state that
altogether.
then, because I think that I wouldn't have an issue with that. It's just adding an extra day would be.
Yeah. I'm sure most members would be sympathetic to other members who maybe have young children You know, if you have to stay to 2 or 3 in the morning for votes, or even 10 or 11 o'clock at night, you don't get to see your children. So, I mean, not just in terms of women, but even in terms of men who have young families, it would be
I was
important.
just about to say that, Chair, because I know we had a meeting, our DSD committee started at 9 a.m. this morning, and I spoke with Morris Devaney, who's round there. He left the house at 6:45 to get into work this morning. So it affects us all,
Yeah.
but it does, and I think we need to find accommodation that suits everybody.
Did you want to know?
No, I just, Paula made the point about travel, like it's a big
Yeah.
point.
All right, for me, that lives
No,
15 minutes up the road.
Sir, what do you?
Just to confirm, the electronic voting, I believe it was the 2007, maybe the procedures held an inquiry into it.
Well, I wasn't here, and I know we discussed it at procedures
Okay, I'll double check that again.
earlier this year. I think maybe it was through you, Chair. I think it was maybe they had asked for it to come back on again. They did a little bit of research into it, and it came back to committee, and committee decided, no, we're not taking this on.
Okay.
So that could be why.
And the research paper had just given us the times that during 2013 the Northern Ireland Assembly sat beyond 6 p.m. on 35 occasions, but it doesn't specify if they were voting times or not. Yeah, we've considered a number. Another option was to increase the predictability of the parliamentary calendar. So that's something that both Sweden and Iceland have done in a means to address the unsociable hours of the Assembly. Other suggestions that we received from stakeholders in respect of unsociable hours was to adopt a form of flexible working hours for members, to review support available for members with primary caring responsibility, and the Assembly to provide childcare facilities. So these were recommendations that the committee received in respect of unsociable hours barrier.
Just on the childcare facilities, again, I'm conscious on if there were childcare facilities, would you want your child to be here until 10 or 11 o'clock at night? So and again, at present there is childcare support provided, where you might be able to enable that support to be provided closer to your home or your family or some other mechanism. So it's not just it needs to be a flexible system, because I'm not sure that those making the recommendations are aware of what support is available already, and it needs to be carefully thought at. So need to provide childcare, continue to provide childcare supports, maybe a better way of. And again, I have never availed of it, but perhaps we should be reviewing those who have and how they find it works. Any members who have made use of it.
Would you want your child here at all?
Well, I think the current procedure is that there's childcare
Only joke.
support.
Joke.
Yeah. Not using jokes from you, Greg.
Well, understand that. Sometimes you have to spell it out.
You do, yeah.
He's always joking, you see. That's what we know of Aston Booker. Can I just
Sorry,
bring on
go
a
ahead,
point
Paula,
out
yeah.
that there are other issues though as well. You know, if say any of our females were to get pregnant and have a child, you've breastfeeding issues and things like that, which we don't look at in the great scheme of things, because we don't have a set time in the Assembly for maternity leave or sickness or anything else. There's nothing in that on our MLA code to say what we're entitled to or what we're not entitled to. So you could find a female MLA coming back to work after a very short time being off on maternity leave, and therefore would need to have, I think it happened with Michelle Gildernew, where she was, having to go out of meetings to breastfeed. So there's lots of other issues, because we don't have that where it says, on our we don't have a contract that says you have 6 months maternity leave, or you can extend that to a year, or we don't have that luxury as MLAs. We're kind of expected to be back at work pretty soon. So there's other wee issues that need to be considered too.
Just on that,
Yes.
Chair, I agree with you, Paula. And funny, at an Assembly Commission meeting, we agreed that we would support, trying to remember the breastfeeding initiative, and make this a breastfeeding-friendly building, which we've done. Now, the one bit I queried, and I know it's with the Deputy Speakers and the Principal Deputy Speaker at the moment, is the chamber was not breastfeeding friendly. So I queried that and said I didn't think that was appropriate, because I was at executive meetings with Michelle Gildernew where she was breastfeeding. and it was because you're right, she was back earlier. So I think we should be supporting the breastfeeding initiative and making this building, supporting the Assembly Commission, making this building a breastfeeding friendly, but make sure the entire building, and the argument I was putting forward is the one place that absolutely needs to be breastfeeding friendly is the chamber.
That would be interesting now.
Of course, if your child's hungry, you have to feed it. Sinead.
We just move on to the next part then. That was
Yeah, just move on.
adversarial environment, which was positive. Just to say that all the points are being collected, just in case people think we're ignoring, the points are being collected and will be reflected. The adversarial environment, again, that was seen from many. The adversarial and institutional environment in Stormont was considered to be intimidating, and it created a negative perception of political life, and that was the feedback we received from quite a number of stakeholders. And this was considered to be off-putting to many women who were considering a career in politics. So we looked at what existing initiatives we have in the Assembly to address this, and obviously the Code of Conduct is the key initiative, and that currently has been, a review of the Code of Conduct is currently being undertaken and will shortly be wound up by the Standards and Privileges Committee. So it may be that inquiry itself or that review is completed by the time our report is published, but again, that doesn't prevent the committee from making any recommendations in respect of that. The other issue, or the other thing we may wish to look at, was the Swedish Riksdag, and we have a copy of the Gender Action Plan from the Swedish Riksdag, where they had looked at behaviour in their chamber, and we may wish to look at something like that as well for the committee. I don't know if anyone has any views on that. The recommendations we'd received were about positive policies and code of conduct and workplace issues and the conduct of the Assembly and committee meetings were some of the recommendations, but obviously stakeholders may not be aware that the Assembly does currently have a code of conduct in place, which is currently being reviewed by the Standards and Privileges Committee.
Thank you, Chair. We've got to remember that this is still politics, though, and there still has to be cut and thrust within politics. And I would have to say, looking around the chamber at the majority of the females in that chamber, we're well able to defend our own corner. We're well able to put our point across. I wouldn't want this to be seen as that we're in some way not able or inferior in some way and not able to command or to do our role as politicians, because there has to be some stage. There has to be some sort of adversarial politics goes on in that chamber. And I just wouldn't want to see the chamber stifled any more than what it is. When we look at the likes of Westminster at question time, if you've ever been in there, you can't hear yourself think, and it's buzzing and it's lively. Whereas sometimes within ours, it's very hard even to actually feel that you're taking part in anything or that you're doing anything, or it can be quite boring, it can be quite lacklustre, and I wouldn't want to see such regulations become so strict that people are not allowed to express an opinion.
Fianna?
Well, I'd probably have a bit of a different view than Paul on this
I
one.
have to say, Ms. Rowan is more than able.
No, you see, I don't think it's about whether women are able or not. Of course we're able, and we're well able. For me, the issue is we might be able for it, but we shouldn't have to deal with it in the way that we do. And even speaking as party whip, the way some of our women are treated is absolutely disgraceful. So I think it's off-putting, you know, and I'm not sure Westminster is the best example to use, because I think a better example are some of the European parliaments where you actually get more work done. That doesn't mean you don't do cut and thrust, of course you do. But I think the adversarial is off-putting to women, and I'm not questioning our ability. Of course we're well able, but it puts off a lot of women. Even the event we were at last Friday, you had your party conference, that's what every woman in the room was saying. Not going into politics, going into that lot shouting across at each other. I think there's a better way of doing politics.
Yeah, but that's not our daily politics here. You may have that because that's what the media choose to show, at night time on television are those things that are happening. Most of the day we have sensible discussions in that chamber, and the majority of our committees are very well run, very well chaired by all our chairs who keep control of the meetings, and that's how they're run. It's only the odd one where there will be someone will get up and say something or do something, and that's what's shown on the media. So I think we need to look at that as well. That's a big issue for it, big problem for us. But I do understand what you're saying. I mean, if I was looking at it from the outside, sometimes I would think, would I want to be part of that?
Well, a younger woman got up the other day, last Friday, and said, yes, I'm the woman who cried in the chamber. Now, it wasn't challenged in the way it should have been. And that woman should not have been put in that situation.
No, she shouldn't
And
have
the
been put in
person,
that situation.
the person who did it got away with it. So,
I feel like crying sometimes myself, but Raymond, go ahead.
You see, I think because, and I've been in Westminster during, the sort of British Prime Minister's question time, and there's no doubt you could say it's buzzing with electricity or whatever the buzzwords is, but I've been in our debates and there wouldn't have been 10 at it, so it can have the contrast, and sometimes that's a set piece, that's set up for the media and stuff like that. So, you see, I think when there's improper conduct, it has to be spotted and then outed. So, you had a situation where someone was improperly treated, left in a particular way, and that could happen to a whole lot of people. So, yes, we're all up for the adversarial. We're all up when you're standing up to take a party position or put out a party position, there'll be whatever. But I think when it stretches a line, and I think we're not great at detecting that and dealing with it, and I think that's the main thing, where that's a responsibility of individual parties. It can be, but certainly should be, in terms of the Assembly, be it a point of order or whatever, but the Speaker, you don't want to be blaming the Speaker in any particular instance, but certainly where there's improper conduct, if it's not spotted, then it continues, and then it becomes a norm, and then it can be dismissed as, actually, that's the way we always do business. If it's wrong, it's wrong. That would be mine.
Trevor?
Well, I think we do actually have a code of behaviour, and in a way you shouldn't need one, because if there was proper respect around the chamber, the thing would fall into place without the need for a written code. As far as the particular incident that Katrina referred to, that was absolutely disgraceful. Mm-hmm. It was personal and it was spiteful, and the person who was the victim of it reacted in a particular way. I wasn't in the chamber. I wish I had been. But as far as this kind of adversarial thing is concerned, Westminster gets criticised roundly for the very fact that it is so noisy and buzzy and adversarial. And we get sometimes criticised for being too quiet and not enough members there. This is a media thing, as we've vividly seen over the last few days, they will pick up on things which are kind of sexy, hot, whatever the word is, but the good work doesn't get reported. I remember just the other night there, and we were doing the end of the education bill. You were there, Chairman, and Colin Eastwood had said that don't know what the Nolan show will say about this, and I commented, does anybody really care? But Stephen Agnew made the really telling comment that you don't need to worry about that because this is progress, therefore they won't report it. And he was dead right. And that didn't make, why would it? There was nobody shouting. That's a problem, sort of crosses gender issues, really, I don't think anybody should be abused in the chamber to the extent that that particular person was at that time.
I think we're all in agreement with that. Claire, carry on.
Yeah, the next issue, the next barrier we had encountered under the institution was a lack of profiling of female members. And that was really, I suppose, under the recommendations. We had received a number of recommendations that the Assembly itself could do to build the profile of female members and to support existing female MLAs. We had, the previous speaker had done a number of initiatives with the Welsh Assembly, which is quite strong on profiling female politicians. But there were other initiatives, such as outreach initiatives to profile female politicians. the creation of a cross-party women's groups, cross-parliamentary networks with women and other legislators, a gender-sensitive parliament based on international best practice, and again there we would refer to the Swedish Riksdag 15-point action plan. Doing events to celebrate International Women's Day, be it week-long events, and official delegations from the Assembly need to be gender balanced to ensure there's and also Assembly gender champions and gender equality audits within the Assembly. So that was some of the recommendations there that we had in respect of that. I'm not sure if members feel strongly in respect of any of those recommendations.
I think all of the above, most definitely. I know for International Women's Day next year, the theme is Women, Peace and Security, which is very much our 1325 APG. I think we have the Long Gallery booked for, I think actually the week before, because there's so much goes on that week with all the voluntary and community women's organisations. I think we have it booked for the week before that. So we are looking at that. I know I'm meeting with someone out of the Politics Plus as well within the next week or two to talk about women in politics, the Women in Northern Ireland Assembly. So that's being done as well. It's something that I had been writing when I looked at our submission, was looking at even trying to do something with the media as well. You know, if we could get something done with the media, whether it's a fly-on-the-wall type documentary, something like that, where we follow whatever a female from each party, whatever it might be, and what we actually do up here, what our role is, you know, how we can contribute to the daily running of our country, you know, and trying just to promote that and show to women that this is a job that any of you can do as well. You know, so I think there are a lot of initiatives in place, but there's still a lot to do, and I think it's the follow-through of the initiatives that's important, because we do have many, and then they stop. It's where do they go then from there? So I think all of those definitely are all worthwhile, definitely.
Okay.
Right, the next barriers that we looked at were political barriers. So again, we looked at it under different headings. The issue of candidate selection was probably the most dominant barrier that came through under this heading. And it was how we get more women appointed, and the issue about the lack of quotas in Northern Ireland compared to other legislators, or other measures that we don't introduce to promote women. For example, a number of submissions made reference to the Sexual Discrimination Act, and you know, not using that thoroughly. So we had looked at this issue. We have really the existing initiative that we have in place at the moment is the Sexual Discrimination Election Candidates Act 2002, which allows parties to use positive discrimination to promote more women, or to encourage more women to stand as politicians. And then, as well as that, the committee looked at positive actions in other jurisdictions, for example, the twinning and zipping in Wales, the initiative in Dáil Éireann for financial penalties for parties that don't have a certain percentage, 30% of women in their lists, and that will increase to 40%, and if they don't increase it, then they will face a 50% cut in their funding. We looked, and the committee itself heard quite a lot about the use of quotas in Iceland. In Iceland they use voluntary quotas, and the impact that has had on encouraging more women to stand and to get more women as politicians. And Iceland in particular has a very good ratio of male to female politicians. We had a submission which made reference to the use of all women shortlists, and again they had made reference to the Labour Party, which had used this initiative, all women shortlists, in Westminster to promote and encourage more women into politics. So that was all of the initiatives on candidate selection. On media exposure, and again this is something that Paul has just made reference to, we don't really have anything to encourage more women. Well, there's two issues on media. The first one is the portrayal of women in the media, which is a stereotypical sort of looking at the women's appearance as opposed to their contribution, which came out as a barrier, and also having more females put forward as a party representative, and that was the issue here, is that political parties need to do more to promote women as in the media and to put them forward. And a positive action there would be Sweden, which has public pronunciation during elections, and again Sweden, for example, would have in their election manifestos what they're doing to address gender inequality, so they are quite strong in coming out right about that. For incumbency and co-opting of seats was considered by quite a number of submissions as a barrier, where it was a potential avenue where women could gain an entry into politics. But a number of submissions had pointed out that actually what is happening is quite a lot of the times that it's the men that are getting the co-opted seats. And so one of the existing initiatives was the use of all women shortlists, which is provided for under the Sex Discrimination Act as a means of addressing that. The lack of support, a number of submissions had made reference to the fact that women, when they enter politics, and again this is a candidate selection issue, they really need a tap on the shoulder or to be approached in order to enter politics. And many women don't feel like putting themselves forward. The submissions have made reference to the fact that they don't feel comfortable putting themselves forward because they don't feel they have the grassroots support there. They maybe don't have the financial resources to allow them to put themselves forward. So for the existing initiatives, we had a dedicated women's officer or section. The Alliance Party made reference to the fact that they have recently set that up. And training and capacity building, again, that was the Ulster Unionist Party had put in their submission about the programme that they had put in place to help women. And again, any other initiatives by the political parties that are in the submissions, will happily reflect those in the draft report. Positive actions in other jurisdictions was issues like job sharing in Scotland and Westminster, which allowed women to consider a career in politics for themselves. That they saw that they had the ability to do a job, that they weren't overburdened. And recommendations then, we had, for candidate selection, there was obviously the recommendations about the use of quotas, and also the Sex Discrimination Act 2002. The quotas was, it could be a means of different ways. It could be voluntary quotas, as in the case of Iceland. A number of submissions made reference to the use of incremental quotas, so that year on year it would increase, and the introduction of mandatory quotas for political parties. Again, there was also the Sexual Discrimination Act and the use of all women shortlists for incumbency or indeed for candidate selection. Media exposure, more visibility for women in political parties in the Northern Ireland Assembly, what the parties themselves can do to address media exposure of women. For lack of support, there was a number of initiatives on that. We had looked at gender equality strategies and action plans, look at the introduction of statutory maternity and paternity leave, look at targeted membership strategy to get more women into politics, and mentoring scheme within political parties, and strong positive support by party leaders. And again, that was a reference that Jane Morris made in her evidence to the committee about public pronunciation by political leaders. But again, there's a whole list there of recommendations. Also, the introduction of party gender champions within each of the parties, and really strong support by the leaders for that. The increase of female participation in committees. Quite a number of recommendations. Is there any thoughts from the committee on that?
Trina?
Well, first of all, obviously, it won't be any surprise that we support quotas and we support mandatory. Obviously, that may be a sticking point in the final report, but I think it needs to be reflected, and it is in our submission. If we're waiting for voluntary, I would respectfully suggest we will still be sitting going far too slow with the number of women, and in the north and south it's particularly bad in Europe. The other thing is the financial penalties that it's operating in the south. It'll be very interesting to see the impact it has, but I think it will have an impact because parties don't like losing money, as we all know. So there's definitely, it's an impetus, and it forces parties to actually take action. The other initiative that we had suggested in our submission, and I can affirm that it definitely works, and that we have that election at our Ardèche, which is our annual conference, to our Ard Corla, which is our governing body, that you have two separate lists. So you have a women's list, and men and women vote for the women, and you have a male list, and men and women vote for the men, and then it's half and half, so it's 50% of each. And that, once you start getting more women into the management structure, that's when you actually start seeing changes happening. The other issue that I think we should be sitting down with all parties, and I'm not sure how we do this, but we're one of the few legislators that have all male speakers. Well, we don't have a speaker, but deputy speakers, principal deputy speakers. And that's not good, because that's a bad image on TV. And that's what's always shown on TV. Whereas you go to Wales, or, you know, when we were in Iceland or in Scotland, you've men and women. And I really think we shouldn't be sending an all-male image. Now, obviously parties would have to work that out, but I think that's something we should be looking at as well. I noticed one of the submissions, I forget which one it had, talked about presiding officers and that it shouldn't just be male.
Oh, do you want that?
A lot of what Katrina has said I agree with. Some of it I don't, which everybody will know the parts that I don't as well. Albeit, I agree, if we don't do something and don't do something quite rash, we could end up in exactly the same position in 10 years' time. And, you know, I know that's what Westminster, what they almost doubled in women when they brought in their all-women list, when the Labour Party brought in their all-women lists and things like that. Not that I'm suggesting that my party do that in any way, in case this is being spun around the building. But I think this is serious now. We do need to seriously think of how we're going to change things, how we're going to change our culture and our climate in Northern Ireland. And much of what is up there, I would be very much behind.
Trevor?
Well, I think, Chairman, we're sort of getting to the nub of all this, aren't we? We can talk about institutional change and making this place gender friendly and all the rest of it until we're blue in the face. Unless you can get parties to some fairly radical changes in the way they think, it won't mean much, you know, because you'll still have male-dominated parties largely choosing males. And there's a very striking figure there that in the 07 to 11 was 14 co-options, all men here, and 3 of them were from women. I mean, that's beyond coincidence. That's just completely wrong. So, you know, there may be something we can recommend, which might even be cross-party, that the co-options have to be treated in a different way. I mean, would it be too radical to say that co-option should be to a person of the opposite sex? You know, I don't know. And this thing that they've done in the South, I wasn't particularly aware of that, but again, it only relates to selection lists. It doesn't place any obligation on the parties, as far as I can tell, to actually to select actual candidates. And I can't help thinking that unless we at some stage move to a list system like Iceland and other places, but then we'll always have a problem with that. Unless you go further than that and say that you must actually elect more female members. I certainly take the point about the high positions, particularly the Speaker's position. That when Eileen Bell was Speaker here, it was well noted, you know, and I think maybe Jane Morris in her time was a Deputy Speaker, am I right? Yeah. That certainly, it's a high-profile position that gives a good impression of the place. I think that's really valid, but really, and there's lots of suggestions here, and the recommendations are, you know, they're random. They've come from various meetings and so on that we've had. They've come from members of the public and interested parties. A lot of them are just off the cuff, aren't they? Really, you know. But there's something there for us to get our teeth into. But I think unless we deal with this section, how do you persuade political parties to take a different attitude and to perhaps accept some form of compulsion? Well, then, this will be another report where we actually waste our time.
And that, sorry, right.
Yeah, Trevor has indicated there's a random group of ideas that come forward here, but sometimes you do need a variety of solutions. There isn't always just one magic bullet. There will be a variety of things which collectively can work together, and it does no harm that there's a degree of brainstorming or diverse ideas coming into this. I wouldn't discount it.
I didn't mean to discount it. Nice.
Yeah, so I still think there are some very useful ideas coming forward. Like Paula, the issue of mandatory candidate selection is still an issue within my party, and we made that comment in our submission, and it's actually coming from more female members as much as anything else. But that's not to say that we all need to do more. No, but we all must do more to improve the balance of the Assembly to ensure that it better reflects society.
Sorry, can I just, as Trevor was speaking, I just thought of a couple of other things. I think the Women's Caucus, and maybe something even more than that, like a statutory committee on gender, given that we're so poor. I don't know about the, I think we should look at that. The other one is the job sharing. And that would be useful for all sorts of people. It would be useful for men and women. It would be useful at different points in your career if you've just had a young baby, or as you're getting older and you don't want to be doing 7-day, 24-hour days. I think we should definitely try and put something in our report about that, because I know it's something that would definitely appeal to me at this point. And I'm sure there's other people looking in going, when I say to them, why don't you join? No way. You sign your life away if you go up for political life. Whereas if you're saying, well, look, you could come in on the job sharing option. You could be the second person, you could be covering X, Y and Z, or you could be the one on this committee and I'm the one on the other committee. I just think it'll be a new way of doing politics.
Claire's just shown me something here that elections to the Assembly and by extension job sharing in political office are an accepted matter under Schedule 2 of the Act. So,
yeah, but even if it's accepted, there's nothing to stop us putting in a report that we're recommending. Like the financial penalties is accepted too, but it doesn't stop us saying we think there should be legislation brought in.
Anna?
Just it comes into my head that back to the voting and the difficulty of voting and so on, that we don't have any pairing system here. I believe in Westminster you can actually pair with a member of an opposite party and neither votes, so you keep the balance the same. That perhaps that's something we could think about here. It would certainly make it easier in some circumstances.
The issue of job share, I need to know more information about how it works in practice. I can see it being quite strange and not normal practice. I'm not sure, is it in place anywhere else in the world? And there's this issue of being accountable to your electorate. And yes, there is a big commitment needed in public representation, but we've moved generally away from the individual putting themselves in front of the electorate to be voted upon, to the situation where a high number of people are being replaced without election. I'm uneasy that the system, the political parties, end up deciding who does what and not the people.
Just to clarify that, I agree with you, Roy. The people need to be voted in. Wasn't it in Iceland? They did there was women.
It was Scotland.
Was it Scotland? Yeah. I'm suggesting that we look at job sharing, but that it's explored as a possibility, but that people put themselves up for election. So that, say in South Down we say, right, well, we're putting me and somebody else up. So you're asking for the vote on that basis.
We know research had weren't able to identify current examples of job sharing in politics, but they had looked at positive actions towards implementing this measure, which was including a commitment by the Liberal Democrats to introduce legislation for job sharing for political representatives in Westminster in the next Parliament, so it may be waiting to see how that goes. There was also a private members' bill for job sharing, which was introduced in the House of Commons in 2012, but it fell due to lack of time. So there may be lessons as well from that.
Okay, Claire, do you want to carry on?
Yeah. In terms of socio-economic, we had identified a number of barriers, and coming out repeatedly was the lack of affordable childcare in Northern Ireland. Under existing initiatives, Northern Ireland really actually doesn't have a childcare strategy at present. There's gone out for consultation on a draft strategy. That is OFM, DFM. They do have a Bright Starts programme.
Can we have clarification? What is the childcare allowance for an MLA? Because I understand it's a reasonably generous allowance, is it?
I didn't even know there was one.
I think it's £30 a week.
Yeah, this would be more so. Yeah, we can have clarity on that. I could get a figure for you, but it would be in the region of that, I think, per week, per child.
Sorry, I didn't realise we're moving off the political. Can I just make one other thing? I think we should highlight the positive. And I know we're not dealing with MEPs, but that does have an impact on us. 2 out of our 3 MEPs are women, collectively in the North. And I think that
do we need a gender equality issue there, that the middle one has to be job share?
Well, no, I'm sure they'd be happy to look at it. But I think we should just highlight that as well.
No problem. Just on childcare, we had looked at childcare earlier, just in the Assembly itself, in terms of childcare allowance and support. I can get you the exact figure, but I think it is approximately, it's available for members, not just female MLAs, but for members.
Let me ask that, is that the same scheme that runs for the members of staff?
That is correct.
In here, that because I know of others, males as well, that anybody can avail of it. So it's exactly the same scheme as the civil service scheme that we have.
If we're back on this page again, just the issue of incumbency and use of all women shortlists again, if any political party wishes to go forward on a voluntary basis, and that means that's fine, but I haven't been given any authorisation to go forward with compulsory mechanisms. I don't know if others are some policies very quietly. No. Just
well, I think it's not so much what each party wants, it's a matter of us laying out all the different options.
Yeah, but if this is the direction we're given to the committee clerks in writing up the report, it's important that they get a sense of how everyone feels.
But is it something that, for example, that we would be encouraging? That, you know, the use of all women shortlists are provided for under the existing legislation. So.
Well, I'm not. Well, I'm just making it clear that I have no authority to approve the use of compulsory shortlists.
Yeah, no problem.
And I certainly don't have that authority either.
No problem.
Certainly, I would have no objection if anyone wishes to use that mechanism. That is their individual choice and political party, but it's not something that has been approved within my own.
No problem.
Chairman, I have to go in a minute, and it's going to leave you.
I'm going to have to go myself pretty soon. Claire,
any decisions to be
taken?
No, we're just on socio-economic. If we could just get through that, that would be useful. So we'll try and whiz through. On the lack of childcare, we had under the existing initiatives, we have a childcare strategy for Northern Ireland that is yet in draft. And although there is an allocated budget for this, it is underspent. We have caring responsibilities, and we do have a carer strategy, as well, under that. But we had looked at positive actions in Sweden and Iceland, which looked at childcare responsibilities, where they had the leave arrangement, so 3 months for the mother, 3 months for the father, and 3 months it could be shared out between both parents. And certainly in the UK, new legislation has been introduced in that respect. We had the lack of entry points, which was the Women in Local Council initiatives, to get women into the local council so that they can go forward. Public appointments, and we have a number of initiatives in place in Northern Ireland, Get On Board, or the Business and Board initiatives. We also had a recent report from the Commissioner for Public Appointments, and along with the Diversity Working Group, he made a number of recommendations to encourage executive and its departments to introduce more women and to recruit more women into public appointments process, because at the moment women are vastly underrepresented in public appointments, and that really hasn't changed that landscape. Again, there are a number of positive initiatives from other jurisdictions. In France, they have quite strong legislation in respect of that, and that's recent legislation on the Gender Equality Act. And again, in Sweden, they have legislation in respect of public office. And Iceland, as well as the committee may know, there isn't more legislation. The recommendations that we received that OFM DFM should advance the childcare strategy as a priority, an updated care strategy with meaningful actions and timelines, a gender equality strategy with deliverable outcomes and timelines, greater monitoring and accountability of a gender equality strategy, an increase in share information and gender equality measures across the departments. So again, the gender equality strategy from OFM DFM, it was published initially in 2006, but it is currently being revised by OFM DFM, and a number of, particularly at the event, there was quite strong views in respect of the gender equality strategy and ensuring it had greater monitoring and accountability. Other initiatives that were recommended was the introduction of gender monitoring, or gender mainstream apologies, and this came back to Katrina's point about a gender committee and the scrutiny of gender, the department's progress in implementing their targets in the gender equality strategy by committees. Other recommendations actually were the implementation of the Commissioner for Public Appointments recommendations that he made for ensuring greater female representation in public appointments as well. Any views?
And there's the issue, sorry, Chair, the issue of quotas there. I mean, that was Iceland, no gender can fall below 40%, and if not, action can be taken.
Quotas in public appointments.
Yeah.
Another issue was there was a run-in period, so before it became mandatory, everybody knew the direction of travel, and I think that was even applied to companies, but that's beyond our
companies. It did, yeah.
But that's beyond our powers. But I think that the principle of using a run-in period and a target of 40%, I think, is quite a sensible target, because you may be down to 10 members of a board, and if you go 50-50, you may be left with just one person, and that may not be the person you need in your board, whether it's male or female. And there may be some sectors that's more expertise in from the female side. But I think 40%, I think, was a reasonable target to aim for.
Okay.
Just on the companies one, I think we should be looking, even though it's not technically our remit, but if companies are going for public contracts, which is one of the discussions yourself and myself had, Trevor, at the time, I remember, but then they have to adhere. And currently, because it's funny, we're going into an Assembly Commission meeting where this is going to be dealt with, currently companies have to abide by statutory duties, and part of the statutory duty is in relation to fair employment monitoring and also Section 75 monitoring, which is also gender. So I wouldn't just say it's not part of our remit. I think we should even note that it's happening.
Okay, finally, just moving on to ensure, actually, we're without quota or quorum actually at this point.
Right.
So we can just review a number of the initiatives. We had, for the barriers we really identified was the political apathy and the lack of confidence and lack of role models. And really this was ideological and psychological barriers that was themselves, that women really considered that they couldn't be politicians. They didn't have the skill sets, they didn't have the confidence for it. And we had quite a number of initiatives, and in actual fact the committee have discussed these at length in the previous committee meeting on this subject about the existing initiatives and the Assembly itself, outreach and engagement.
The Commonwealth existing, some of these not run their course. Democracy, I think the funding's ended for it, so it's current and previous initiatives. It's nothing. I don't think there's anything happening in Democracy now.
They are part of a, is it LAID they're called? Democracy
LAID.
is part of LAID.
Oh, right, okay.
So we have that. There is which is made up of various different female. That is still there, albeit hasn't run programmes for a long time, but Democracy is part of that.
Yeah, that's on page 49, just of your pack, the reference to LEAD. So that programme is currently in operation and has been developed as a partnership between women's organisations and the community. And it's really working on 3 levels, from raising awareness to building political leadership skills and capacity building for participation. The reason we had mentioned democracy is no longer in existence because of lack of funding issues. But there was quite a lot of interest from the committee in respect of that particular initiative when we met the last time. The Women for Election programme is actually an initiative it's in the south, and that is something that again the committee have expressed an interest in. And the Politics Plus programme, as Paula made reference to, they have a programme for women in politics again, where they have a number of initiatives there. One of the issues the committee may wish to consider is having a more joined-up approach for that. A lack of role models, and this is again something that we heard from Jane Morris, was about her Women Seen and Heard. It's an initiative that she's starting to get off the ground, but again it is addressing the whole media issue about how it portrays women, as we discussed earlier, and the need for the media to address that, and maybe the Assembly itself, and how it does portray women so that women are not put off by the negative media portrayal. We also had heard in the evidence that we received about a case in Switzerland where they had run a programme for profiling female politicians. It was three shadowing and mentoring schemes, but also for profiling female politicians, and that had a net impact in terms of encouraging more women to go forward into politics. And there was quite a lot of research from the submissions that we received that once you did profile female politicians, it did encourage other people to see themselves, other women, to see themselves as a career choice. Again, a number of recommendations in respect of that was looking at outreach and education service and how it could raise the interest and engagement of women and girls in politics, so maybe doing more about schools and letting them see that it's a career choice.
That's a big issue. Sorry to break in here, but I attended an event 2 weeks ago in the MAC, which was run by Youth Action and NIWEP, and it was all young girls from 13 to 19, and they had said that they don't get an introduction to politics, like most kids, until A-level year. So that's when they start looking at politics. So already we have cut out a section of our community that, leave school at 16, that they're not there to do the road. So that's them out of the road for a start. And even then they were saying where it was on their curriculum and most of their schools, they weren't able to do it because it was on at a time when they were wanting to do whatever else. So there's a big issue there, big problem there. And another point, I know we want to get finished. A few of those young girls, their comments to me were, in order to be a politician, you had to be middle class and you had to be a graduate. And I just thought, wow, is that what the message we are sending out from this place is, that you have to be a middle class graduate? That's not.
I thought most people thought we were all thick.
Well, yeah. Does that mean if you're a graduate that you're any cleverer? No, it doesn't. So I agree with what you're saying, definitely. The portrayal of politicians, never mind women in politics.
One idea I have anytime I'm talking to young people is it's healthy that everyone has an interest in politics, that they contribute to politics and they join and they can aspire, but you'd be very foolish if you didn't have a back. What are my other options if I'm unsuccessful? So there's a danger of just people thinking my only contribution to politics is to become an MLA. It's to engage with making the right decisions and pressure, lobby and all the rest of it. And ultimately you might become an MLA, because it's more than just becoming an MLA, it's taking part in the process. And in doing that you will gain the skills that you need to become an MLA. But if we just say this is how you get to the top of the tree, it's an awful long way to travel. But not only that, a lot of people will fall by the wayside and feel, oh, I've been unsuccessful. Whereas, even any politician, what's going to do when suddenly we're not successful in an election? You have to have other skills to go on and find a job.
Absolutely.
And I think it should be getting more people to participate in the political process.
Yeah. And that's whenever we're out speaking with young people, we very much be saying to them, politics is not just about being an elected representative. It's so much bigger than that. There's even the lobbying companies. There's all of the different components that go into politics. So I think Roy's absolutely right. And career politicians that leave university and decide I want to be a career politician.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the best politician,
Yeah.
because really very little life
Exactly.
experience or whatever, you know. So you have to weigh all of that up. I agree.
But it's healthy that young people would become involved in politics, contribute to it, ideally go out and get some experience in the real world, and then seek political office.
And again, in our assembly, none of us know. I mean, if this, I mean, may well end at any time. None of us know. It's very uncertain, and you know, you really do need to have a career to fall back on, or a job that you know you can go back to. So we need to remember all that. Sorry, we're slightly off the.
That's why we should all be worried about welfare cuts. Might be going back on welfare.
Sorry, I'm going to have to go here anyway. So, is that us anyway? Suppose last issue is next date, time, place, next meeting will be on the 9th of Tuesday, 9th of December at 10:30 in room 21.
9th of December.
Well done. Oh,
Thanks
it was
very
very
much.
good.
Well, on the 9th of December, then what we're planning to do is to bring a draft report as a committee consideration. But we'll bring forward a discussion paper, and that will have the key conclusions and recommendations, and then we can discuss those as a committee on the 13th. We can discuss them on the 9th of December, and then again we can discuss it on the 13th of January again. So there will be two opportunities to discuss it, just to allow us to progress matters.
It's important we have a full house as well, so that
Yeah.
everybody's.
And then we have a couple of options of different types of reports, you know, because if we're not going to agree on quotas or whatever, I hope we do, but if we're not going to, and
We
listening
could
to
have
Right.
6 different reports.
No, I know.
What you need is, if there's areas where there's dispute, you put an addendum in at the back.
or a minority report, can we just have the options of what type of report we could have?
Yeah,
If you want to disassociate yourself with the entire report,
No,
you're
no,
entitled
no,
to do
no.
so.
Being very negative
we don't
now,
want to do
Katrina,
that.
looking at
No, we don't
As
want
long
to
as
do
your-
that.
as long as your views are adequately reflected in the report.
But just
It's
the
about-
option
it's
of
about-
different types.
Most of the reports that this committee does, if there isn't agreement on a particular issue, lays out options.
Exactly.
Some members were in agreement with this option, others were in agreement
Yeah.
with a different option. We try to get agreement where we can, but
Yeah.
we all know it isn't always possible. And the most important question, Claire, when's Christmas party and free drink?
Were we switched off at
Okay.
that stage?
Thanks very much.
That's switched.
Oh, is that off?